You've been building with Claude Code, automations, MCP servers, maybe even something that you're calling an Agentic OS. But you're still re-explaining context. You're still copying output from one session into the next. Every time you add something new, you're still connecting prompts to more prompts. That's not an agentic system. That's you becoming the infrastructure. Now I'm going to show you the layer that I put between my automations that is taking me out of the loop entirely. This is a system that compounds instead of you building a bigger job for yourself. Now I want you to think about what you did last week. How many times did you take the output from one tool and manually feed it into another? How many times did you re-explain context that you feel like Claude should already know? That's not overhead. That's basically a tax that you're paying for skipping the layer that's between your automations. And it goes up every single time that you build another or add another automation. This is what's actually happening under the hood. You've got Claude doing one thing over here, and then it produces output. Maybe that's good output. Then you take that output and you open a new session or a different tool and you paste it in and say, here's what I need you to work with. And Claude goes, cool. Who are you? What's the context? What are we doing? Because it doesn't know. It can't know. You never told this session about your previous one. So now you're re-explaining. You're reformatting. You're doing the translation work between your own automations. And that's fine when you have 2 or 3 of them. But when you have 10, 15, 20 things running, you're essentially becoming a router. You become the middleware. Every new automation that you add is another thing that depends on you to feed it the right context at the right time. And a key thing that I want you to understand is this doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like it's productivity. You're building and you're shipping and stuff is getting done, but the overhead is slowly growing underneath you and you don't notice it until one day you realize you're spending more time connecting things than you are on actual work. And here's the other thing, the part that actually makes this hard. Even when you connect everything right, Claude doesn't give you the same output twice. The same context, the same instructions, and you get a 9 out of 10 quality run and then a 5 on the next. Without the right system in place, most of those runs are going to be 5s, which means you're either spending twice the time iterating to get it right, or you're shipping work that you know isn't quite there yet. The whole point of what I'm about to show you is to flip this ratio so that the 9s are what you're expecting, not what you're hoping for. What does this layer look like? Because it's not just another tool. It's not another plugin or an MCP or external integration. It's actually much simpler than that. The layer is 2 things. Shared context that every step reads, and then structured handoffs between your automations. Let me break that down. Shared context means there's one place where your identity, your audience, your criteria, your voice, where all of it's living. And every automation in your system reads from that source. So when one step runs, it knows who you are and what you care about. When step 2 runs, same thing. When step 5 runs, same thing. Nobody re-explains anything because the context is already there. Now, the structured handoff part, this is where most people's systems end up breaking. So your automations produce output in whatever format they want. It could be freeform text, bullet points, a wall of JSON, whatever Claude felt like doing that day. And then the next step has to figure out what to do with the output. The fix is designing each step's output around what the next step needs to receive. Not what this step can produce, what the next step needs. That flip in thinking changes quite a bit. Let me use an example. I've got a content automation system that I use that has a recon step. This recon step doesn't just find topics. It scores them, it tags them, and then it outputs them in the exact format that my next step, which is a triaging step, expects. The triage step doesn't just pick the winners. It structures them so that my script step knows exactly what to work with. Each step is engineered around the handoff that the previous one creates, not around just itself. And then there's the quality gate piece. I mentioned just earlier about a volatility problem. You put the same inputs, but you get different outputs. So here is how you handle that. Between each step, you build in a simple check. Did the output actually meet the quality bar? Does it have the fields that the next step needs? If it doesn't, it gets caught here, not 3 steps downstream when everything else has degraded. When you put all 3 of these things together, shared context, structured handoffs between your automations and your automation steps, and then the quality gates, you get something that doesn't just connect your automations. It makes every step's output better because each step is informed by the same context, formatted for the next consumer, and then checked before it moves forward. That's the layer. And now let me show you what it actually looks like when it's running. All right, so I'm in a workspace and I have a planning doc here. This planning doc is for a real project. It's called Carousel Factory for now. And this is part of a larger social content creation system. What this tool will do is take a content brief and it will output branded slides as MP4s. All right, now it's just a markdown doc and it's sitting in a folder. What we're going to do is use the same skill that created the planning doc and we're going to move it into the next stage, which is a different tool that actually will facilitate the build of this project. So I'm going to call that now, and it is called Seed. Now, Seed is an ideation workflow. It's a skill, so it'll help you actually ideate on whatever project it is you're trying to create. So you might have just an inkling of a thought, and you can run it through this, and it will work through that with you. Then once you get to the final stages, which is to graduate or launch this, now, graduation just moves it to an apps folder. Now it says apps here, but it can be anywhere that you want to move your build projects. Then launch takes that a step further and will set up the next tool that I'm talking about, or the next framework, called Paul, and Paul will actually facilitate the building with Claude and you as well. Now I'm going to tell it I want to launch this with tasks launch. So what this is going to do is it's going to pull in the launch sequence, and the concept that I'm wanting to explain or demonstrate here is how one automation, one tool, one framework creates an output. It does its job, but then the shape of that output is expected by the next automation or the next tool that does something completely different. If you can shape your output to fit the next, then you can have your chain of tools and frameworks all connected cohesively together. This is what an agentic operating system actually is. And the funny thing is it mostly works by simple file system and the basic infrastructure of Claude. So we'll be using things like file system, basic JSON files, and hooks. All right, so it's going to create all of this here. It sees exactly what type of project this is. It's going to infer that it's a utility project, that's true. All of the details here that are important are needed. It's got some open questions. There is no skill loadout. There is no breakdown yet because Paul hasn't been set up. So it's going to run the initiation of Paul all on its own. And then we'll see the project actually put together. All right, so it just came back with a proposed layout for the Paul project. I'm just going to approve everything and move this forward, and it will scaffold out the whole thing for me. All right, so what happened here is it put it inside of the root of my workspace. And so I asked it to create an apps folder and move the Paul project carousel factory, this one here, into the apps, and to do that going forward. It then suggested to make a workspace rule so that, it will follow this every time going forward. And I said, yes, please. And then I asked it to make this as a Carl rule. So Carl is actually a hook-based system that injects rules into Claude's system messages, but it keyword matches and allows you to only inject rules based on what you're working on. So it put it in the JSON. It happens automatically. It's very low overhead. The token cost is very nominal. It doesn't really cost too much, but it keeps Claude from making these kinds of mistakes. So now what I want to do is I'm going to open up one more, and I'm going to say, what projects do I have? I want to see what it pulls up. And then I also want to take a look here at this. All right, so it made this rule as a global rule. I'm going to actually set this as true. All right. And there it is. It sees that it's the Paul project, phase 0, it's idle, it's in progress, and it also has an ID. And then I want to ask it if it is seeing the Carl rules to make sure everything is loading. And see, I turned the dev mode on true. So now it's going to start appending that on every single response. So I can see under the hood into how Claude is actually rationalizing things, what rules it's applying, what signals it's getting access to that inform it before I ever send a prompt. So Claude now has eyes underneath everything and can see what's going on in my workspace before I say anything. And everything is these very small lines of really concise context, not a lot of noise. This is what I've spent the most time working out, is the signal to noise ratio. So Claude's getting just what it needs, just when it needs it. It has a general awareness of what's here between the Claude.md and the base structure. Then I can go directly into my Paul project. Let's run /Paul plan in carousel factory. So let's just run Paul plan in the carousel factory, and then it immediately jumps in, and I can essentially just run the loop and build the application. It will come into me at certain points in time to approve things or to confirm that things are being built correctly, to make sure that quality stays present and that it doesn't drift away from spec, which doesn't really happen that often. All right, and that is essentially how this whole thing ties together to build an agentic system. Now, as new automations are built or new skills are built, I can think of everything else that's, here, and see how one automation can enhance into the next. Now, remember, even this carousel factory, it's a part of a bigger system. It's a part of a content creation system. Carousels are only one type of post. You have Reels, you have LinkedIn posts, you have things that you need to generate for graphics, stuff like that, that all can go into a content creation system. So when I'm building the carousel factory, I'm also thinking in terms of, well, what does the brief look like that actually will generate the carousel, and what steps come before the carousel factory to give the output that carousel factory is expecting as an input. These are the ways to approach this, and that's the mindset to have. So now that's the whole loop. An idea became a managed project. The workspace picked it up automatically. And when something had went wrong, the system learned from that correction in real time. There wasn't any re-explaining. There wasn't manual setup. I didn't copy and paste context between these tools. Each piece feeds the next, and the system gets smarter every time I use it. Now, what I just showed you took only a few minutes, but the pattern that's underneath it, the shared context, the structured handoffs between the tools, and the quality gates that catch drift and learn from corrections, that's all something that you can set up in your own workspace in about an afternoon. I made it a lot easier than starting from scratch, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. What I want to do is bring this back to you and your setup. You don't need to build what I've built. What you need is the pattern. So there are 3 things to take away from this. It's first, your automations need shared context sources. One place where all of your important stuff lives, and every step reads from it. This can be as simple as a single JSON file or a Markdown doc that Claude loads at the start of your sessions. The point is, you stop re-explaining and you start loading. Second, design each step's output for the next step's input. Before you build an automation, ask yourself, what does the thing after this need to receive? Structure your output for that, not for yourself or not for readability. You structure it for the next consumer that's in the chain. And third, build quality checks between your steps, not just at the end. Claude, in and of itself, is a variable. The outputs, they can vary before they cascade through your system and produce garbage at the end. These 3 things are what separate a collection of automations from an actual system. And once you have them in place, adding a new automation doesn't add more work for you. It inherits the context, it follows the handoff structures, it gets quality checked automatically. That's when things start compounding instead of just piling up. If you want to set this up for yourself, I put the entire system in the Founders Toolkit inside of AI Builders and Operators. Base, Paul, the workspace layer, the state tracking, the hooks, all of it. You can grab the frameworks, plug them into your own workspace, and have this running. It's free to join. Link is in the description. Thanks for watching. If this shifted how you think about your AI setup, I'd appreciate you sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.